Her millionaire CEO husband abandoned her with nothing when she was 9 months pregnant. 20 years later, he saw her with a young billionaire. The champagne glass trembled in his hand as Marcus Bennett stared across the ballroom at the woman he had thrown away like yesterday's newspaper. She was standing beside one of the youngest billionaires in American history, and Marcus had no idea that the young man shared his blue eyes. Vivian, his ex-wife. The woman he had handed divorce papers to when she was 9 months pregnant with his child. The woman he had left with nothing while he built an empire on the foundation of her stolen work. She looked radiant in an emerald gown that probably cost more than the cramped apartment he had forced her to flee into 20 years ago. Her silver-streaked auburn hair was swept elegantly upward. Her posture radiated the quiet confidence of someone who had survived devastation and emerged victorious on the other side. Marcus set his glass down because his hands would not stop shaking. The young billionaire leaned close to Vivian and said something that made her laugh. It was the same laugh Marcus remembered from their early years. The laugh he used to live for. The laugh he had silenced when he chose a younger woman over the family he had sworn to build. I need to talk to her. The thought consumed him. I need to explain. I need to apologize. I need to make this right. He began walking across the ballroom, past the crystal chandeliers and the designer gowns and the whispered conversations of Manhattan's elite. Every step felt like walking through water. Every breath felt like drowning. When he finally reached them, Vivian's expression did not change. She had seen him coming. She had been watching him approach with the calm detachment of someone observing a stranger. Vivian. His voice cracked on her name. You look incredible. Marcus. One word. Just his name. No warmth. No hatred. Nothing at all. He turned to the young billionaire, searching the man's face for something familiar, something that might confirm the impossible suspicion forming in his mind. And you must be Daniel Drake. I have followed your career. What you have accomplished is remarkable. The young man's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Thank you, though I should clarify. I have not accomplished anything. My team has. My mother has. I just had a vision and found people who believed in it. My mother. The words hit Marcus like a physical blow. This was his son. The baby he had abandoned in a hospital room 20 years ago. The child he had dismissed as a domestic complication. The family he had thrown away because he wanted his life to remain his own. Daniel Drake had built a $3 billion empire without him, had become one of the most celebrated young entrepreneurs in the world without him, had grown into a man who stood in rooms like this as a guest of honor, while Marcus stood in the shadows watching his own company crumble. Could we talk? Marcus heard himself say the words as if from a great distance. Somewhere private. There is so much I need to say. Daniel looked at his mother. Something passed between them. A silent conversation born of 20 years of partnership that Marcus had forfeited the right to understand. 5 minutes. Vivian's voice was steady. That is all I have. They found a quiet alcove away from the celebration, away from the cameras and the congratulations and the glittering evidence of everything Marcus had lost. I made a terrible mistake. The words tumbled out of him. Leaving you, leaving Daniel. I convinced myself. I was choosing freedom, but I was choosing emptiness. Claudia and I divorced within 4 years. The company is failing. Everything I thought I was building toward has crumbled. I'm sorry to hear that. Vivian said it simply, without sarcasm, without satisfaction. I want another chance, not to be his father. I know I have lost that right, but to be present in some way, to contribute to his life, to yours, to make amends for what I destroyed. Vivian studied him for a long moment. Her expression was unreadable. When she finally spoke, her voice was gentle but devastating. Marcus, you are not asking for a second chance. You are asking for rescue. That is not what this is. It is. Even if you do not recognize it, your company is failing. Your reputation is damaged. Your relationships have ended. And suddenly, after 20 years of absence, you want connection with a billionaire son and the ex-wife you discarded. I have changed. People change. Have you? Or have your circumstances changed and you are adapting to new realities? Because 20 years ago, when you had power and success and options, you chose to abandon your pregnant wife. Nothing I have heard tonight suggests you would make a different choice if the circumstances were different. Marcus felt the words land in his chest like stones. I loved you. His voice was barely a whisper. Before everything went wrong, I genuinely loved you. I know. Vivian's eyes held something that might have been compassion. I loved you too, but love without loyalty is just attraction, and partnership without commitment is just convenience. You taught me that lesson the hardest way possible. She turned to leave, then paused. Daniel may choose to have some relationship with you. That is his decision. But I want you to understand something clearly. If he does, it will be because he is generous and curious, not because he needs anything you have to offer. He built himself without you. I built myself without you. We are complete. You are the one who is incomplete. She walked back toward the ballroom, back toward the celebration, back toward the life she had built from the ashes of everything he had destroyed. Marcus stood alone in the alcove. The distant sounds of applause and laughter mocked him from the main room. His son was probably receiving some kind of recognition right now, being celebrated for achievements Marcus could have witnessed, could have contributed to, could have been part of. But he had chosen differently, and some choices cannot be unchosen. Some doors once closed remain closed forever. My friends, if you have ever watched someone you discarded rise higher than you ever imagined possible, if you have ever thrown away something precious because you thought you could do better, only to discover that what you had was irreplaceable, if you have ever stood in a room and felt the crushing weight of your own choices pressing down on you like a physical force, then you understand exactly what Marcus Bennett felt in that moment. Have you ever been abandoned by someone who promised to protect you? Have you ever been told you were not enough, only to prove that you were more than they ever deserved? Have you ever built yourself back from nothing while the person who destroyed you watched from a distance? What Marcus did not know, what he could not possibly have anticipated, was that the reckoning in that ballroom was only the beginning. The full story of how Vivian Morrison went from abandoned pregnant wife to the mother of a billionaire. The full story of what Marcus threw away and why it was too late to get it back. That story requires us to go back 23 years to the moment when two ambitious dreamers met and believed they were building something that would last forever. Because what happened between then and now will show you exactly how a man can have everything and lose it all. How a woman can lose everything and build it back stronger. And why the people who throw you away often end up watching you shine from a distance they can never close. Before we dive into this story of abandonment, survival, and ultimate vindication, I need you to do something for me. If you have ever been underestimated by someone who should have believed in you, if you have ever been left behind by someone who promised they would stay, if you have ever wondered whether karma is real and whether the people who hurt you will ever face consequences, hit that subscribe button right now. Ring that notification bell, because this story is about to prove that the people who throw you away often end up begging for you back. But by then, it is too late. Drop a comment below and tell me, have you ever had someone abandon you only to regret it later? I want to hear your stories, and I will be reading through every single comment. Now let us go back 23 years to the moment when Vivian Montgomery was about to meet the man who would give her everything, and then take it all away. Boston in the early 2000s was electric with possibility. The city's financial district buzzed with the frantic energy of an economic boom that seemed like it would never end. Glass towers rose from concrete foundations faster than anyone could count them. Development firms competed for every available lot, and ambitious young professionals worked 18-hour days, believing that hard work and talent would inevitably be rewarded. Vivian Montgomery was one of those ambitious young professionals. At 28, she had already established Montgomery and Partners Architecture, a small firm that punched well above its weight class. She specialized in community-focused design, buildings that served people rather than just impressing critics. Her portfolio was modest but growing. Her reputation was solid. Her dreams were enormous. The call came on a Tuesday morning, while Vivian was reviewing blueprints in her cramped office. Miss Montgomery. Her assistant's voice was barely controlled excitement. Bennett Development wants to meet. They are considering us for the Harbor District project. Vivian's heart jumped. The Harbor District project was legendary in Boston development circles, a mixed-use waterfront development worth over $200 million. The kind of project that transformed small firms into major players. The kind of opportunity that came once in a career if you were lucky. When do they want to meet? Tomorrow, 10 in the morning. Their downtown headquarters. Vivian spent that night preparing. She reviewed every public document about Bennett Development she could find. She studied the Harbor District site from every angle. She refined her presentation until every slide was perfect, and she tried on her best suit, the one she had purchased second-hand and carefully tailored to fit. It was slightly worn at the cuffs, evidence of 3 years spent building a business on a shoestring budget, but it would have to do. The next morning, she arrived at Bennett Development Headquarters 15 minutes early. The building was a gleaming tower of glass and steel that announced Marcus Bennett's success in architectural language Vivian understood perfectly. This was a man who wanted the world to see his power, who designed his spaces to intimidate before the first word was spoken. The conference room was on the 40th floor. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a view of the harbor that would eventually hold her designs. If she could convince Marcus Bennett to choose her, she set up her materials, checked her presentation one more time, smoothed down her blazer, and waited. Marcus Bennett entered the room 15 minutes late. He walked with the confident stride of someone who expected the world to wait for him. In his early 30s, dark hair slightly tousled in that carefully careless way that expensive stylists achieved, blue eyes that assessed Vivian with an intensity that felt almost physical. His suit fit him perfectly because it had been made specifically for his body. No second-hand alterations required. Miss Montgomery. He extended his hand. I apologize for the delay. Board meeting ran long. No apology necessary. Vivian shook his hand firmly. I appreciate you making time to meet. Let us get started then. I have reviewed your portfolio. I have questions. The meeting was supposed to last an hour. It lasted 3. Marcus did not just ask about her qualifications or her pricing or her timeline. He asked about her philosophy, why she designed the way she designed, what she believed buildings owed to the communities that housed them, how she balanced aesthetic vision with practical function. And Vivian found herself talking in ways she rarely did in business meetings, about her belief that architecture was a form of service, about the Riverside Community Center she had designed pro bono because the neighborhood needed it more than she needed the fee, about her conviction that too many architects designed for awards rather than for people. That is exactly why I want to work with you. Marcus leaned forward in his chair. His eyes held an intensity that made Vivian's heart beat faster. Every other architect I have interviewed talks about vision and legacy and innovation. You talk about service, about community, about the people who will actually use the spaces. I did not realize I was being interviewed against other architects. You were not. I had already decided to offer you the project before you walked in. This meeting was about confirming that my instincts were right. Vivian felt something loosen in her chest. Something she had not realized was tight. And were they? Your instincts. They were. The Harbor District project is yours if you want it. Of course I want it. This is the opportunity of a lifetime. Good. Marcus stood, gathered his materials, then paused. Have dinner with me. The shift in tone caught Vivian off guard. Mr. Bennett, this is a professional meeting, which is over. You have the contract. Now, I am asking a separate question. Have dinner with me, not as a client, as someone who has not had a conversation this engaging in years and does not want it to end. That is not appropriate. Probably not. Marcus smiled. It was the first time she had seen him smile, and it transformed his face, made him look younger, less intimidating, more human. But I am asking anyway. One dinner. If it is terrible, we pretend it never happened, and you still have the Harbor District project. I am not the kind of man who punishes professional relationships for personal rejection. Vivian studied him, searching for the angle, the hidden motivation. The trap that men like Marcus Bennett usually laid for women like her. She found nothing but directness. Nothing but a man who had seen something he wanted and was asking for it honestly. One dinner. She heard herself say, "Tomorrow night. Perfect." Now, my friends, I want you to pay close attention to what happens next, because the way Marcus Bennett presented himself in the beginning was so different from who he would become. And that is the danger of falling for potential instead of patterns. Remember this. People tell you who they are through their actions over time, not through their words in the beginning. There was a warning sign in that very first meeting. Did you catch it? Marcus arrived 15 minutes late. A small thing, easy to overlook, easy to excuse as the schedule of a busy executive. But small disrespects are previews of larger disrespects. The person who does not value your time will eventually not value your contributions. The person who keeps you waiting will eventually keep you waiting for things that matter much more than a business meeting. Watch for the small signs. The dinner led to another dinner, then another. Within 3 months, Vivian and Marcus were inseparable. He was everything she had never allowed herself to want. Charming without being shallow. Ambitious without being ruthless. Passionate about building things that would outlast both of them. He listened when she talked about design philosophy. Really listened. Not the performative listening that many men did while waiting for their turn to speak, but genuine engagement with her ideas, genuine curiosity about her perspective, and he championed her in rooms full of men who tried to dismiss her expertise. The Harbor District project brought them together professionally as well as personally. Weekly meetings became daily conversations. Design reviews became working dinners. The line between business and romance blurred until Vivian could not remember where one ended and the other began. "I have never met anyone like you," Marcus told her one night as they reviewed blueprints in his penthouse apartment. The city lights glittered beyond the windows. Empty takeout containers testified to another working dinner that had stretched past midnight. You see things other people miss. You create things other people cannot imagine. Being with you makes me better than I am alone. Vivian felt her heart swell with something dangerous, something she had spent years protecting herself from. She was falling in love with a man who had the power to destroy her professionally and personally, and she could not seem to stop. "I should probably be more careful." She said it lightly, like a joke. Mixing business and personal is not exactly recommended. Probably not. Marcus set down the blueprints, turned to face her fully. But here is what I have learned in 30 years of living. The things that scare us the most are usually the things that matter the most. Love is not safe. Partnership is not safe. Building something real with another person is the most dangerous thing you can do. But the alternative is a safe life that does not mean anything. What are you saying? I am saying that I want to build something with you, not just the harbor district, not just a business relationship, a life, a partnership, something that lasts. Marcus, we have only known each other 3 months. I know it is too fast. It is not practical. It is everything I would advise any friend against. But I also know that I have never felt this way about anyone, and I do not want to lose this because I was too cautious to reach for it. He reached into his jacket pocket, pulled out a small velvet box. Vivian's breath stopped in her chest. I was going to wait, he said. Plan something elaborate. But I have never been patient when I know what I want. And I want you as my partner, as my wife, as my equal in everything we build together. He opened the box. A diamond caught the city lights and scattered them like tiny stars. Marry me, Vivian. Build a life with me. I promise I will spend every day making sure you never regret saying yes. Vivian looked at the ring, at the man holding it, at the blueprints scattered around them, evidence of the work they had already begun creating together. Every practical part of her screamed to slow down, to wait, to be careful. She had seen too many women lose themselves in relationships with powerful men, had watched too many careers derailed by partnerships that turned toxic. But Marcus was not asking her to lose herself. He was asking her to expand, to become more than she was, alone, to build something neither of them could build separately. Yes, the word came out before she could stop it. Yes, I will marry you. Marcus slid the ring onto her finger, pulled her into his arms, and Vivian thought this was what partnership felt like. Not just romantic love, but the deeper satisfaction of building something meaningful with someone who valued your contributions as much as their own. She had no idea how wrong she was. Here is the first lesson this story teaches us. Be careful of people who enter your life during your moments of striving. Some people see your hunger and ambition not as qualities to admire, but as vulnerabilities to exploit. They position themselves as the answer to your prayers, not because they want to help you succeed, but because they want to attach themselves to your eventual success. Marcus saw Vivian's brilliance and decided to acquire it before anyone else could. He dressed a business decision up as a love story, and Vivian was too in love to see it, too hopeful to question it, too trusting to protect herself. The wedding was small, 30 guests, close friends, and family. No elaborate production because neither of them cared about spectacle. They cared about substance. They married overlooking the harbor district construction site. Vivian's design rising from the waterfront. Marcus's development vision becoming reality. Their shared future taking physical form in steel and glass and concrete. The first 3 years of marriage were everything Vivian had hoped for, everything Marcus had promised. Montgomery and Partners merged with Bennett Development's design division. creating an integrated firm that handled development and architecture under one roof. Vivian's designs won awards. Marcus's business acumen turned those awards into contracts worth hundreds of millions. They were featured in industry publications as a power couple, proof that romance and business could not only coexist, but thrive together. At home, they fell into easy rhythms, morning coffee together, before the chaos of work, evening walks through the neighborhoods they were reshaping, late nights reviewing plans, and dreaming about projects that would take years to complete. They argued sometimes about design choices, about business strategy, about the small frictions that any two strong personalities generate. But they always resolved it, always came back to the central truth that they were building something together. "You know what I love most about us," Marcus said one evening 3 years into their marriage. They were cooking dinner together in their penthouse kitchen, Vivian chopping vegetables while Marcus handled the stove. A domestic scene that still felt precious despite its ordinariness. "Tell me, we are actually partners, not just in name. You challenge me. You make me think harder. You do not let me get away with lazy thinking or easy answers." Most successful men end up surrounded by people who just tell them what they want to hear. "You tell me the truth." Vivian smiled. "Someone has to keep your ego in check." "Exactly, and I love you for it." He kissed her, quick and affectionate. The kiss of someone who had kissed her 1,000 times before and expected to kiss her 1,000 times more. "I have been thinking," Vivian said carefully, "about the future. What out it? About children. Whether we want them. When we might be ready." Marcus's expression flickered. Something crossed his face too quickly for Vivian to read. "I have thought about it too," he said, "but maybe not right now. The firm is at a critical stage. We have the Chicago expansion and the Miami project and that development deal in Phoenix. Maybe in a year or two, when things stabilize." Vivian nodded. That made sense. They were both so busy, so focused on building their professional legacy. Children could wait. But she filed away that flicker in his expression, that moment of something that was not quite enthusiasm, not quite hesitation, something she could not name. She should have paid more attention. And here is what made the eventual betrayal so devastating, my friends. It was not built on lies from the beginning. The partnership was real. The collaboration was genuine. The success they built together was authentic. Marcus did not marry Vivian as part of some elaborate scheme. He married her because at that moment in his life, he genuinely believed in what they were building together. But Marcus's character, his true character, was like a bomb with a slow fuse. The person he was in the beginning was not who he would become. Success changed him. Power revealed him. And by the time Vivian saw who he really was, she had already built her entire life around him. Success is a revealer of character, not a builder of it. The person who is kind when they are struggling may become cruel when they are thriving. The person who values partnership when they need you may discard partnership. When they feel they have outgrown you, watch how people handle success even more carefully than how they handle struggle. Anyone can be humble when they have nothing. True character is revealed when someone has everything. But here is what I also want you to remember. Falling for someone who later betrays you is not a character flaw on your part. Trusting someone who proved untrustworthy is not stupidity. It is humanity. We love with the information we have. We commit with the character we see. When people change or reveal hidden aspects of themselves, that is on them, not on us. Do not let anyone convince you that being deceived is the same as being foolish. Now, before we continue, I want to prepare you for what comes next, because this is where the story gets difficult. This is where the fairy tale shatters and the nightmare begins. If you have ever been betrayed by someone you trusted completely, the next part of this story might bring up some painful memories. But I want you to stay with me, because Vivian's story does not end in the darkness. It ends in the light. The suffering she is about to endure becomes the foundation for something greater than anything Marcus Bennett could ever build. Sometimes our worst moments become the launch pad for our best lives. Remember that as we go forward. 3 years into their marriage, Vivian was 31. Marcus was 35. They had discussed children as a someday proposition that had seemed safely distant, until suddenly it was not. The pregnancy test showed 2 lines. Vivian sat on the edge of the bathtub in their penthouse bathroom, staring at those 2 lines until they blurred. A baby. Their baby. The next chapter of the life they were building together. She waited until that evening to tell Marcus, planning the moment carefully, making his favorite dinner, opening a bottle of the wine they had saved from their wedding. "I have news," she said, as they sat across from each other at the dining table. City lights glittering beyond the windows. Good news or bad news? I think good news. Amazing news. Terrifying news. She reached across the table and took his hand. "We are going to have a baby." Marcus's reaction was strange. Not negative, exactly, but strange. A flash of something unreadable crossed his face before his expression settled into careful enthusiasm. "That is wonderful news," he said. But Vivian noticed that he did not reach for her immediately. He did not pull her into his arms. He did not cry or laugh or react the way she had imagined 1,000 times. He processed the information like a CEO receiving a quarterly report, acknowledging the data, calculating the implications, preparing his response. And in that moment, something in Vivian's chest tightened. She told herself she was being paranoid. She told herself men processed big news differently. She told herself everything was fine. "Are you happy?" she asked, because she needed to hear him say it. "Of course, I am happy. This is what we have been working toward. A family, a legacy, everything we planned." The words were right, but something was off. Something subtle that Vivian could not quite identify. "It is earlier than we discussed," she said carefully, "with the Chicago expansion and everything else going on. If you need time, to adjust to the idea. No, no, I do not need time. This is wonderful. We will figure it out. We always do. He squeezed her hand, smiled his charming smile, suggested they call their families in the morning to share the news. But something shifted after that announcement. Something subtle. Something that Vivian would not fully recognize until it was too late. The changes began slowly. So slowly that Vivian could dismiss each one individually as a coincidence, or a temporary pressure, or an understandable response to the demands of a growing business. Marcus began working later, coming home after Vivian was already asleep, leaving before she woke. When she asked about it, he always had answers. The Chicago deal is complicated. The investors need more attention. This is just a busy phase. Business trips extended from days to weeks. New York for meetings that seemed to never end. Miami for site inspections that required his personal attention. Singapore for investor relations that only the CEO could handle. And the doctor's appointments. The pregnancy milestones that Vivian had imagined they would experience together. Marcus missed the first ultrasound because something came up with the Beijing investors. Missed the second because the board meeting ran long. Missed the gender reveal appointment because of an emergency in the Phoenix office. I am so sorry, he would text. His apologies, always eloquent, always reasonable, always promising that next time would be different. Vivian learned to hold her own hand during ultrasounds, learned to ask medical questions without a partner to help her remember the answers, learned to smile at other couples in the waiting room, the ones where husbands held wives' hands, where partners took notes, where fathers to be stared at ultrasound screens with tears in their eyes. She told herself her situation was different, not worse, just different. She was lying to herself. The nursery was another casualty. They had planned to decorate it together, spent hours looking at themes and colors and furniture options. But when the time came to actually set up the room, Marcus was always busy, always apologetic, always promising to help next weekend. Vivian painted the walls herself at 7 months pregnant, standing on a step stool that made her back ache, brushing soft yellow onto the walls while the baby kicked inside her. She told herself this was fine. She was independent. She did not need help. She could do this alone. She was practicing for what was coming. She just did not know it yet. When she confronted Marcus about his absences, he had a gift for making her feel unreasonable. The company is at a critical juncture, he would say, his voice patient, almost condescending. I am building a legacy for our child. Once things stabilize, I will be more present. I promise. And Vivian believed him because she wanted to believe him, because the alternative was too painful to consider, because her entire life was built on the foundation of their partnership, and questioning that foundation felt like questioning everything she had built. Here is what Vivian did not know. Marcus was not working late. He was not traveling for business. He was not building a legacy for their child. He was building a case for his exit. And every appointment he missed, every weekend he was absent, every dinner he cancelled. It was all preparation for the moment when he would disappear entirely. The first evidence appeared at 7 months pregnant. Vivian was looking for Marcus's car keys. He had left them in his coat pocket, as he often did, and she needed to move his car so the cleaning service could access the garage. She reached into the pocket, and her fingers found a slip of paper, a receipt. Cartier, $3,000. A necklace she had never seen, never worn, never received. She stared at the slip of paper for a long time, turning it over in her hands as if a different angle might reveal a different truth. A gift for a client's wife, perhaps. A reward for a valued employee. A surprise for her that he had not yet presented. But the receipt was dated 3 weeks prior, and Vivian's birthday had passed without jewelry. Their anniversary had passed without jewelry. Christmas had passed without jewelry. Still, she said nothing. She told herself she was being paranoid. She told herself pregnancy hormones were making her suspicious. She told herself that Marcus would never, that he was incapable of, that their marriage was stronger than. Then came the hotel charge. She was reviewing their joint credit card statement because the accountant needed receipts organized for tax purposes, scrolling through charges that were mostly mundane. Business, dinners, office supplies, travel, expenses, the Faina, Miami, 3 nights, presidential suite, charged during a weekend. Marcus had told her he was visiting his mother in Connecticut. Her hands went cold. Her vision narrowed until all she could see was that charge, that specific evidence that something was very wrong. There had to be an explanation. There was always an explanation. Marcus was many things, but he was not a liar. He was not a cheater. He was not the kind of man who would betray his pregnant wife. She put the statement away without mentioning it. She would ask him later. There would be a reasonable answer. There had to be. And finally, the perfume. Marcus came home late one night smelling like something that was not her. Something floral and expensive. Something that clung to the collar of his shirt in a way that suggested close contact. Extended close contact. New cologne, she asked, trying to keep her voice casual. What? No. Same as always. There is a different scent on your shirt. Something floral. Oh, that. A client's wife hugged me at the charity dinner. Very European. Very enthusiastic. You know how those events are. Vivian nodded, because she did not know what else to do, because challenging him felt like admitting her life was falling apart, because at 7 months pregnant, she could not face the possibility that everything she believed was a lie. But the evidence was accumulating. The late nights, the extended trips, the jewelry she had never received, the hotel in a city he claimed never to have visited, the perfume that was not hers on the shirt she would have to wash. She tried to convince herself she was imagining things. That pregnancy was making her paranoid and insecure, that Marcus loved her, and would never betray her. But somewhere deep inside she already knew. She just was not ready to admit it. The confrontation came at 8 months pregnant. Vivian had spent 3 weeks gathering evidence she did not want to find. Credit card statements, phone records, calendar discrepancies that could not be explained by business demands. By the time she was ready to speak, she was certain of the truth. She just needed to hear him say it. She waited until an evening when he was actually home. When the city lights glittered beyond their penthouse windows, and the nursery she had painted alone stood waiting down the hall for a baby who would arrive in weeks. "Are you sleeping with someone else?" The question hung in the air between them. Marcus set down the glass of wine he had been drinking. His expression went through several phases: surprise, calculation, and then something that looked almost like relief. Yes. One word. Just yes. No denial. No deflection. No attempt to save what they had built. Vivian felt the word impact her chest like a bullet. She had known. She had known for weeks. But hearing him confirm, it was different. Hearing him admit it so easily, so calmly, as if destroying her world was a minor inconvenience. Who is she? Her name is Claudia. She is a junior partner at Whitmore Capital. We have been involved for 8 months. 8 months. The words barely registered. 8 months. Their entire pregnancy. Every appointment he had missed. Every business trip that had extended. Every late night at the office. All of it had been lies. You have been lying to me for 8 months, while I have been carrying your child, while I have been decorating a nursery alone, while I have been going to doctor's appointments alone, while I have been believing that we were building a life together. I did not plan for this to happen. You did not plan it. You have been living a double life for 8 months. You have been looking me in the eye every morning and lying about where you are going and who you are with. You do not accidentally do that for 8 months, Marcus. I know, and I am sorry. But Vivian, something in our marriage died a long time ago. This pregnancy just made me realize. Do not, her voice cracked, do not you dare blame this on our baby. Do not you dare. What happened next was worse than the confession itself. Marcus did not beg for forgiveness. He did not fall to his knees. He did not swear it was a mistake, that he would end it, that he would choose his family. Instead, he paced to the window of their penthouse and looked out at the city skyline as if the view were more interesting than his pregnant wife's devastation. Claudia understands what I need, he said, his voice calm, almost clinical. She does not expect me to be a partner in everything. She lets me be successful without making me feel guilty about the cost. The cost. Vivian's hand moved to her belly where their son kicked against her palm. I am the cost. You want me to be something I am not. You want partnership and balance and shared responsibility. Claudia wants to support my career without diluting it with domestic complications. Domestic complications. Their child, the life they had created together, the family they had planned, reduced to a domestic complication. What about the baby? Vivian's voice was barely a whisper. What about the family we planned? I do not think I am ready for that responsibility. Marcus turned to face her. His expression was strange, almost apologetic, but not enough, not nearly enough. I thought I was, but watching you become a mother, it has made me realize I want my life to remain my own. Claudia does not want children. She wants to support my career without the weight of family expectations. So you are leaving me. Vivian said it flatly, a statement of fact rather than a question. I have already filed for divorce. Marcus reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out an envelope. My lawyers will contact you about the settlement. I am trying to make this as clean as possible. He handed her divorce papers while she stood in their penthouse at 8 months pregnant with his child. Clean. She stared at the envelope in her hands. I am 9 months pregnant, Marcus. There is nothing clean about this. My friends, I need to pause here for a moment, because what Marcus just said, that explanation he gave for his betrayal, that is something I want you to really hear. He said Claudia lets him be successful without making him feel guilty about the cost. In other words, Claudia does not challenge him. Claudia does not expect him to show up. Claudia does not hold him accountable for his promises. And Marcus interpreted that absence of standards as love. If you are watching this, and you recognize that pattern, if you have ever been told you are too demanding for expecting basic partnership, if you have ever been made to feel guilty for wanting the person who promised to be there to actually be there, I need you to understand something. The problem was never your standards. The problem was their character. Now, if this story is resonating with you, if you have ever been abandoned by someone who should have protected you, I want you to hit that like button right now. Not just because it helps this channel, but because that like is you saying, I survived betrayal too. I know what this feels like. Every like on this video is someone standing in solidarity with everyone else who has been thrown away by someone who was supposed to love them. Drop a comment and tell me, what is the most devastating excuse someone has ever given you for betraying your trust? I am reading every single comment, and I want to hear your stories. Now, let us continue, because what Marcus did next was even worse than the affair. The divorce papers were a masterclass in legal erasure. Despite having designed the architecture that won Bennett Montgomery its most prestigious contracts, despite having contributed innovations that had increased the company's value by hundreds of millions, despite having been introduced to investors as Marcus's equal partner, Vivian was being classified as an employee, a compensated worker whose contributions belonged to the corporation, a replaceable part in a machine Marcus now claimed to have built alone. Her lawyer reviewed the documents with a grim expression. They are arguing that everything you created was work for hire, that your contributions were compensated through your salary. that the firm's intellectual property belongs to the corporation, not to you individually. I was a co-founder. I designed the architecture that made this company what it is. Legally, you were listed as an employee once the firms merged. Marcus retained controlling ownership. Your stock options vest over 10 years, and you are only 5 years in. They are arguing that leaving voluntarily means forfeiting the unvested shares. I am not leaving voluntarily. He is divorcing me. His lawyers are framing it as a mutual separation due to irreconcilable differences. If you contest that framing, it becomes adversarial. They will depose you. Question your contributions. Challenge your involvement in every project. It could take years. I built half that company. I know. But proving it in court requires resources you do not have. Marcus controls the company. He controls the records. He controls the narrative. So what are you saying? That I just accept this? I am saying that fighting could take years and drain every resource you have. You are about to have a baby. You need stability, not prolonged litigation. The settlement offer was devastating. 3 months of rent on a modest apartment. Access to enough savings to survive maybe 6 months if she was extremely careful. Her existing vested stock options, which represented a fraction of what she had earned through her work, and joint custody of a child, Marcus had already made clear he did not actually want. No acknowledgement of her co-founder status. No recognition of the designs she had created. No admission that Bennett Montgomery's success was built on her architecture. The documents described Marcus as founder and CEO. They described Vivian as an early employee who had contributed to technical development during the company's initial phase. Initial phase. As if her contributions had ended after the first year, instead of continuing through 5 years of growth and expansion. I know this is not fair, her lawyer said quietly. But sometimes survival requires accepting unfair terms. You can rebuild. You can start over, but only if you preserve your resources and your energy for what comes next. Vivian stared at the papers in her hands, the legal language that erased 5 years of work, the settlement that left her with almost nothing, the signature line that would finalize her erasure from the company she had helped build. She thought about fighting, about depositions and discovery and court battles that could stretch for years. She thought about her baby arriving in weeks, about the energy she would need just to survive as a single mother, about the resources she did not have and the time she could not spare, and she made the decision that would haunt her for years. She signed. Here is something I need every person watching this to understand. What Marcus did, the systematic erasure of Vivian's contributions, the legal maneuvering that stripped her of everything she had built. This happens every single day. It happens to women in business partnerships. It happens to spouses who contribute to family businesses. It happens to anyone who trusts that handshake agreements and shared history will protect them. Document everything. Every contribution you make. Every idea you generate. Every email you send. Make sure your name is on patents, on presentations, on records, because the person who loves you today might not love you tomorrow. And when love dies, all you have is documentation. Vivian trusted. Vivian believed. Vivian thought partnership meant partnership, and she lost everything because of it. Let her story be your warning. Love with your whole heart, but protect yourself with your whole mind. The final meeting took place in what had been their shared office, the space where they had reviewed blueprints together, where they had celebrated contract wins and navigated project challenges, where Vivian had believed they were building an empire as equals. Marcus sat across from her at the conference table. His lawyers flanked him like protective barriers. Vivian's single attorney seemed small in comparison. If you sign these final documents, we can conclude this cleanly. Marcus's lead lawyer spoke as if this were a routine transaction. Mrs. Bennet will receive the agreed-upon settlement, and both parties can move forward. Vivian looked at Marcus, searching for something. Regret, shame, any acknowledgement that he was destroying something that had mattered. She found nothing, just polished professionalism and barely concealed impatience. Before I sign, she said, I want to understand something. Looking directly at Marcus. When you introduced me to the board as your co-founder, when you told investors we were equal partners, when you credited me in interviews for the designs that won us our biggest contracts, was any of that real? Or was I always just an employee to you? Marcus shifted uncomfortably. That employee to you. Marcus shifted uncomfortably. That is not relevant to. It is relevant to me. Were you lying then? Or are you lying now? The room went silent. Marcus's lawyers exchanged glances. This was not following the script they had prepared. Things change. Marcus finally said, people grow apart. What was true then is not true now. So you are saying it was true, that I was your partner, that we built this together. I'm saying the legal structure was always clear. Whatever words were used in public, the corporate documents tell the actual story. The corporate documents you controlled, that your lawyers drafted, that I signed without independent counsel, because I trusted you. Vivian, Marcus's voice carried a warning. We can make this difficult, or we can make this clean. Your choice. She looked at the papers, at the man she had loved, at the lawyers waiting to formalize her erasure. Then she picked up the pen and signed. What else could she do? She was 9 months pregnant. She had almost no resources. Fighting would take years she did not have. Energy she could not spare. Money she would never recover. Sometimes survival requires surrender. Sometimes protecting your future means accepting present injustice. Sometimes you sign papers that erase you because the alternative is being destroyed completely. Vivian walked out of that building for the last time. The lobby that had once felt like home now felt like hostile territory. The security guards, who used to greet her by name, looked through her as if she were invisible. She was already being erased, and the man she had helped make successful stood at the window 40 floors above, watching her disappear. Daniel Alexander Drake was born 3 weeks later in a community hospital on the outskirts of Boston. Not the private birthing suite Vivian had imagined during the early months of her pregnancy. Not the room with soothing music and essential oil diffusers and a supportive husband coaching her through contractions. Just a shared delivery room, with white walls and fluorescent lights, and the distant sounds of other women laboring in other rooms. She was alone. Her mother had passed away 2 years earlier. Her father lived in Arizona and could not afford the flight on short notice. Her friends from the architecture world had slowly distanced themselves once word spread about the divorce. No one wanted to be caught between a powerful CEO and his discarded wife. So, Vivian labored alone. 12 hours of pain that seemed impossible to survive. Contractions that tore through her body like waves of fire. Moments when she gripped the bed rails and wondered if she could actually do this. If she could bring a life into the world when her own life had fallen apart so completely. And through it, one thought kept her focused. One promise she made to the child, fighting to be born. You will never doubt that you are loved. You will never feel abandoned. Whatever your father chose, whatever life throws at us, you will know your worth. Daniel arrived at 3:47 in the morning. 7 pounds, dark hair, blue eyes that would eventually become the exact shade of his father's. He screamed his arrival into the world with the fury of someone who had important things to do and was annoyed at being kept waiting. Vivian held him against her chest in the quiet aftermath of delivery, tears streaming down her face, exhaustion and joy and terror and love all tangled together into something she could not name. "Hello, Daniel," she whispered to her son. "I am your mother, and I am going to build you the most beautiful life. A life so good that we will not need anyone who does not choose us. I promise." It was the most important promise she would ever make. The nurse came to check on them an hour later. A kind woman with gentle hands and tired eyes. "Is there someone we should call?" she asked. "The baby's father, perhaps." Vivian shook her head. "No. It is just us." The nurse nodded without judgment. She had seen this before, would see it again. Single mothers were not unusual in this hospital, but there was something in Vivian's expression that made the nurse pause. Not defeat. Something fiercer. Something that looked like the beginning of war. "You are going to be just fine," the nurse said. "Both of you." Vivian looked down at her son, at his tiny fingers, and his impossible smallness, and the weight of responsibility that had settled onto her shoulders. "Yes," she said, "we are." The apartment was 400 square feet of salvation, a Murphy bed that did not quite close properly, a kitchenette where 2 pots could not fit on the stove at the same time, a bathroom the size of a closet, 1 window that looked out onto a brick wall, radiators that clanked through the night like restless ghosts. This was what 3 months of rent could buy in Boston when you were starting over with nothing. Vivian carried Daniel through the door for the first time and stood in the center of that tiny space trying to see possibility instead of poverty. "Welcome home. She told her son, "It is small, but it is ours." Daniel responded by waking up and screaming. He was colicky. The pediatrician used that word like it explained something, like naming the problem made it easier to solve. But colic just meant that Daniel screamed for hours at a time, his face red and furious, his tiny body rigid with discomfort, inconsolable no matter what Vivian tried. She walked him up and down that narrow apartment at 3 in the morning, 4 in the morning, 5 in the morning, both of them crying, her voice ragged as she sang lullabies she barely remembered from her own childhood. "Please, Daniel, please stop crying. Mama is trying. Mama is so tired. Please." But babies do not understand exhaustion, do not understand that their mothers are human beings with limits, do not understand that sometimes love is not enough to fix what hurts. When the crying finally stopped, Vivian would sometimes just stand in the silence, too exhausted to sleep, staring at the brick wall outside her window and wondering how she had gone from a penthouse overlooking the harbor to this. A single mother in a cramped apartment with a baby who would not stop screaming and a future that looked terrifyingly blank. My friends, I need to pause and talk directly to anyone watching this who is in the middle of their own struggle. Anyone who is right now in that cramped apartment, facing that impossible situation, wondering if they are capable of surviving what life has thrown at them. I see you. This story sees you, and I need you to know that the chapter you are in is not the chapter you will end on. Vivian, standing in that tiny apartment at 4 in the morning, could not imagine the woman she would become. She could not picture the son Daniel would grow into. She could not fathom that the man who abandoned her would one day stand in a ballroom watching her triumph. But that is the nature of darkness. It makes us believe that light will never return. Hold on. The next chapter is coming. If you are in your struggle season right now, I want you to drop a comment below and just say, "I am holding on." That is all. Just let this community know you are out there fighting your fight, and watch how many other people are fighting alongside you. You are not alone. Now hit that subscribe button if you have not already, because Daniel's story is about to take a turn that will give you chills. Everything Vivian sacrificed, everything she built in those dark years, it was all about to pay off in ways she never could have imagined. There was one night that Vivian would never tell Daniel about. He was 3 months old. The colic had finally started to ease, but she was still running on fragments of sleep. The freelance work she had been counting on had not materialized. Former colleagues at Bennett Morrison Design had been warned not to hire her. Professional doors she had expected to open remained firmly closed. The bank account was almost empty. The rent was due in a week, and she had just received a letter from Marcus's lawyers reminding her that the settlement terms prohibited her from making any public statements that could be construed as disparaging to Bennett Morrison Design or its leadership. They were making sure she stayed silent, making sure she could not tell her side of the story, making sure her erasure was complete. That night, after Daniel finally fell asleep, Vivian sat on the bathroom floor at 4 in the morning, and wondered if she was capable of doing this. The tile was cold beneath her. The fluorescent light buzzed overhead. In the other room, her son breathed the small, steady breaths of infant sleep, and she sat there in the harsh light and asked herself questions she had been afraid to voice. What if I cannot do this? What if I am not strong enough? What if I fail him the way everyone expects me to fail? The despair was physical, a weight pressing down on her chest, a darkness at the edges of her vision. She could not see a way forward, could not imagine how she would pay the rent, or find work, or build a life from this wreckage. She sat on that cold floor and cried, silently, so she would not wake Daniel. The tears of someone who had finally reached the end of their strength. And then Daniel made a sound from the bedroom. Not crying, just a small baby noise. A little coo, the sound of someone dreaming peaceful dreams. Vivian lifted her head, wiped her eyes, and something shifted inside her. Not because she suddenly felt capable, not because the despair lifted, not because anything external had changed, but because that sound reminded her that someone was depending on her to figure it out anyway. Her feelings did not matter. Her doubts did not matter. Her exhaustion and fear and despair did not matter. What mattered was that a baby in the next room needed her to survive, needed her to fight, needed her to be stronger than she felt. She stood up from that bathroom floor, washed her face, made a cup of the cheap instant coffee that was all she could afford, and sat down at her tiny kitchen table with a notebook. She wrote down everything she knew how to do, every skill she had, every connection she might still be able to leverage, every possible path forward, no matter how unlikely. By morning, she had a plan, not a perfect plan, not even a good plan, but a plan, something to do, something to try, something other than sitting on bathroom floors and surrendering to darkness. That was the night Vivian Morrison stopped waiting to be saved and started saving herself. The rebuilding happened slowly, painfully, one small victory at a time. She took any freelance work she could find. Residential renovations that paid a fraction of what her commercial projects used to earn. Kitchen redesigns for families who could barely afford the construction costs, let alone a proper architect's fee. Community center consultations that paid $500 for work that would have earned $5,000 at Bennett Morrison Design. She worked during Daniel's naps, during the quiet hours after he slept, during stolen moments, while he lay on a blanket, watching shadows move across the ceiling. She learned to code with a baby on her hip, learned to take client calls with a pacifier in her pocket, learned to be two people at once, because she did not have the luxury of being only one, and she refused to let scarcity define Daniel's childhood. When they could not afford toys, she taught him to build with cardboard boxes and tape and imagination. She saved empty containers and turned them into stacking blocks. She made puppets from old socks and created stories where the characters went on adventures and solved problems and always came out stronger on the other side. When they could not afford art supplies, she brought home construction paper from the recycling bins of her consulting jobs. Crayons she found at yard sales for pennies. markers that were almost dried out, but still had enough ink for one more drawing. When they could not afford books, she took Daniel to the library every Saturday. Their special day, their ritual of abundance in a life of constraint. He would sit in her lap in the children's section, and she would read to him for hours. Story after story, world after world, showing him that imagination was free even when everything else cost money. "We can build anything, Daniel," she told him when he was old enough to understand words. "We can create anything. We do not need someone else to give us permission. We do not need to wait for someone to save us. We can save ourselves." He was too young to understand what she meant, but he was not too young to absorb it. The lesson seeped into his bones, became part of who he was, the child of a woman who refused to be defeated, the son of a mother who built worlds out of nothing. Something was happening to Vivian in those years. She did not recognize it at the time, but later she would understand. She was becoming someone stronger than the woman Marcus had married. The woman Marcus had married needed validation, needed acknowledgement, needed her contributions to be seen and credited and celebrated. The woman raising Daniel alone had no space for such luxuries. She had to know her own worth without anyone confirming it. She had to be her own audience, her own champion, her own proof of what she was worth. And in that solitude, that constant self-reliance, she became unshakable in a way that comfort and partnership had never allowed. There is something I want you to understand about suffering. We live in a culture that tells us to avoid pain at all costs, to find shortcuts around difficulty, to medicate and distract and scroll our way past uncomfortable feelings. But suffering, when it does not destroy us, often builds something that comfort never could. Vivian, in the penthouse, was talented. Vivian, in the cramped apartment, was forged. There is a difference. Talent is what you are born with. Character is what you are shaped into. And sometimes the shaping requires pressure, heat, constraint, all the things we would never choose, but that create the strongest versions of ourselves. I am not romanticizing poverty or abandonment. I am not saying everyone should suffer to grow. But I am saying that if you are going through something terrible right now, it may be creating someone remarkable inside you. The version of you that exists on the other side of this struggle might be exactly who you were meant to become. By the time Daniel was 5, Vivian knew her son was different. Not just intelligent. Many children were intelligent. Daniel was obsessive about understanding how things worked. He would stare at buildings for minutes at a time, asking questions that adults could not answer. Why does that tower not fall over, Mama? It is built on a strong foundation, she would explain, kneeling beside him on the sidewalk. And the materials are designed to work together, to hold each other up. But how do they know how much weight it can hold? How do they know where to put the strong parts? They calculate it. Engineers use mathematics to figure out where the stress points are, where the building needs more support. Can you teach me the mathematics. He was 5 years old, asking about structural engineering, looking at buildings the way other children looked at ice cream trucks. Vivian could not afford fancy schools or expensive tutors, so she became his teacher. Every evening after Daniel finished his homework, they would sit together at their small kitchen table, and she would explain architecture, not in simplified terms, not in baby language, but in the real vocabulary of her profession. Load-bearing walls, tension and compression, the mathematics of beauty, the physics of function. Daniel absorbed everything like a sponge dropped in the ocean. By 8, he was asking about materials science, why some buildings used steel and others used concrete, how glass could be structural instead of just decorative, what made some designs earthquake-resistant while others collapsed. Vivian found herself having to study just to stay ahead of his questions, reading engineering journals after he went to bed, watching lectures online during her lunch breaks, learning new things so she could teach them to a child who seemed to have no ceiling on his curiosity. By 10, Daniel was writing computer code. He had taught himself from library books and free online tutorials. Vivian could not afford a computer, so he used the ones at the public library. Hours spent at those terminals learning languages she did not understand, creating programs she could not follow. "I want to see my designs, Mama," he explained one evening. "I draw them on paper, but I cannot see if they would really work. If I can make them on the computer, I can test them, see where they would break, fix the problems before I build them." He was 10 years old, teaching himself programming so he could model architectural designs, finding solutions to problems using tools he had to invent because no one had invented them for him. By 15, Daniel had created something that would change everything. He called it eco-design, a software program that could analyze any building plan and identify hundreds of ways to reduce energy consumption without compromising structural integrity or aesthetics. The algorithm learned from every building it analyzed, becoming more sophisticated with each use, developing insights that even experienced architects had missed. The first major firm to notice was a mid-sized architectural practice in San Francisco. They had stumbled across Daniel's work through a chain of connections that neither he nor Vivian fully understood. Someone had shared something with someone who knew someone who was looking for exactly what Daniel had built. The licensing offer came via email. $20,000 for a 1-year license to use eco-design in their practice. Daniel stared at the email for a long time. Then he turned to his mother. "This is not a joke, right? $20,000 is real." "It is real." Vivian felt tears threatening behind her eyes. "It is very real. That is more than you made last year from all your projects combined." "I know." They sat together in silence, processing what this meant. $20,000 would not make them wealthy, but it would provide breathing room, security, the ability to think about the future instead of just surviving the present. But more than that, it was validation, proof that Daniel's work had value beyond their small apartment. Evidence that all those hours at library computers and all those evenings at the kitchen table had produced something the world wanted. "What do I do now?" Daniel asked. Vivian took a deep breath. "Now we protect what you have built." She had learned that lesson the hardest way possible. She would make sure Daniel never learned it the same way. The next 3 years were a masterclass in building properly. Vivian insisted on lawyers. Real lawyers. Not the cheap options that would have been easier on their limited budget, but attorneys who specialized in intellectual property and technology licensing. She could not afford them. Not really. But she found ways. Payment plans. Deferred fees. Creative arrangements that left her financially strained but legally protected. Every contract Daniel signed was reviewed. Every licensing agreement was structured to protect his ownership. Every partnership was documented with the precision of someone who knew exactly what happened when trust replaced paperwork. Never let anyone own what you have created, Vivian told her son one evening, as they reviewed another agreement together. Never trust that partnership will protect you. Document everything. Own everything. Because people will try to take credit for your work. People will try to erase you from your own story. Do not let them. Daniel listened with the seriousness of someone who had watched his mother rebuild from nothing, who understood without being told that these warnings came from experience, from wounds that had healed but left scars. "Is that what happened with my father?" he asked quietly. Vivian was silent for a long moment. "Yes, he took credit for your work. He took credit for our partnership. He rewrote history to make himself the sole founder of something we built together. And I let him, because I was tired, because I was pregnant, because fighting would have cost more than I had to give." She looked at her son, at the young man he was becoming, at the brilliance she had nurtured and the character she had shaped. "That will not happen to you," she said. "I will make sure of it." At 18, Daniel made a decision that terrified his mother. He had scholarship offers from MIT, Stanford, and Caltech. Full rides to institutions that would have validated every sacrifice Vivian had made. Every night without sleep. Every meal she had skipped so he could eat. Every dream she had deferred so his dreams could flourish. But Daniel had other ideas. "I can learn what I need to learn while building," he told her one evening. They were sitting at the same kitchen table where she had taught him about load-bearing walls a decade earlier. The apartment was nicer now. They had moved twice as the licensing revenue grew. "But some things stayed the same, and I can build something that helps people now, not in 4 years. Every year, I wait. That is millions of people living in buildings that waste energy and harm the environment. I do not want to wait. Daniel, these are the best universities in the world. The connections you would make, the credentials you would earn, the doors that would open. I know, and I know you sacrificed everything to give me options. I am not taking that lightly. But Mama, you taught me that we do not wait for permission to build. We do not wait for someone else to validate our ideas. We just build. Vivian felt the argument crumble before she could voice it. He was right. He was using her own lessons against her. The principles she had instilled in him from infancy were now guiding him toward a choice she found terrifying. "If you are going to do this," she said, finally, "you are going to do it right. I will advise you. I will review every contract. I will protect you from the vultures who smell young money. But the vision has to be yours. The decisions have to be yours. I am not going to rebuild my career through my son. Understand? I understand, but I want you with me, not just as protection, as a partner, a real partner, the way it should have been with." He stopped himself. They did not talk about Marcus, not anymore. Vivian reached across the table and took her son's hand. "Okay," she said, "let us build something." Drake Technologies was founded in the small second bedroom of their apartment. Daniel as CEO and visionary, Vivian as chief advisor and the only board member he trusted. A company built on sustainable building systems and renewable energy integration, on the belief that architecture could heal the environment instead of harming it. The timing was perfect. Climate concerns were driving massive investment into green infrastructure. Companies and governments were desperate for solutions that could reduce carbon footprints without sacrificing functionality or aesthetics. Daniel's technology offered exactly that. The first major contract came from a European development firm that had discovered eco-design through industry connections. They wanted Daniel to consult on a massive mixed-use development in Amsterdam. Sustainable design from the ground up. The kind of project that would put Drake Technologies on the map. At 20, Daniel's net worth crossed $10 million. At 22, it crossed $100 million. At 24, the billion-dollar threshold fell. Forbes ran profiles. Bloomberg analyzed his rise. The Wall Street Journal called him the future of sustainable development. Every article noted his youth, his vision, his seemingly overnight success. What they rarely captured was the character behind the headlines. Daniel did not live like a billionaire. He drove a modest car, lived in a comfortable but not extravagant apartment, donated more than half his income to environmental causes and educational programs for underprivileged students. And he talked about his mother in every single interview. "Everything I am started with a woman who refused to let circumstances define our future." He told a Forbes reporter during one of many profiles, "She could have given up when my father abandoned us. She could have accepted less than she deserved. Instead, she built a life that did not need him. And she taught me to build the same way." The reporter had pressed for details about his father. Daniel declined to provide them. "This story is not about him," he said. "He made his choices. I made mine. The difference is I actually show up for the people who depend on me." It was the closest he had ever come to public criticism of Marcus Bennett. And it was enough. Industry insiders understood the implication. Tech journalists connected the dots. The story of the abandoned wife and the brilliant son slowly entered circulation, not as something Daniel promoted, but as context that followed his success. The invitation to the Forbes 30 Under 30 Gala arrived on a Tuesday afternoon. Heavy cardstock, embossed with the Forbes logo. A celebration of the most innovative young leaders in business. Daniel's name prominently featured among the honorees. He handed the invitation to his mother with something like nervousness on his face. "I want you there," he said. "This is as much your achievement as mine." Vivian held the invitation, feeling the weight of paper that represented 20 years of struggle and survival. 20 years of sleepless nights and bathroom floor, despair and slow, careful rebuilding. "Your father might be there," she said carefully. "Bennett Development is still technically on the Forbes lists, even if barely." "I know." Daniel's jaw tightened with an expression that looked remarkably like his father's intensity, but directed by his mother's purpose. "I think I am ready to see him. Are you?" Vivian thought about the cramped apartment where she had wondered if she could survive. The contracts she had signed that erased her from her own achievements. The years of rebuilding, while Marcus built a new life on the foundation of her stolen work. Then she thought about who she had become, the woman forged in those fires, the mother of a billionaire who credited her in every interview, the advisor trusted with protecting an empire from the vultures who always circled success. "Yes," she said, "I think I am." There is something important in how Vivian raised Daniel. She could have filled him with bitterness toward his father. She could have made Marcus into a monster, a villain to be hated and blamed for every hardship they faced. Many abandoned parents do exactly that. And honestly, they have every right to. But Vivian chose differently. She chose to build, not tear down. She chose to focus on what they were creating, not what they had lost. She chose to let Daniel form his own conclusions about his father through observation, not manipulation. That is a particular kind of strength. The ability to experience genuine wrong without requiring everyone around you to hate the person who wronged you. It freed Daniel from carrying Vivian's bitterness. It let him develop his own understanding. And ultimately, it made their family stronger than any shared hatred ever could have. The night of the gala arrived. Manhattan glittered beneath a clear November sky. The Fairmount Hotel had been transformed into a celebration of success. Crystal chandeliers scattered light across marble floors. Designer gowns swept past in rivers of silk and satin. The elite of the business world gathered to honor the next generation of leaders. Vivian stood in the lobby, adjusting the emerald gown she had purchased specifically for this occasion. It was the most expensive piece of clothing she had ever owned. More than their entire clothing budget had been during those lean first years. But Daniel had insisted. "You are walking into that room as the mother of one of their honorees," he had said. "You are not walking in looking like you do not belong." She had almost argued, almost said that appearances did not matter, that she knew her worth, regardless of what she wore. But then she remembered all those years of worn suits and second-hand blazers, all those meetings where she had been judged before she spoke because her clothing announced her constraints. And she accepted the gown. Tonight, she would walk into a room full of people who had never struggled to pay rent, never wondered if they could afford groceries, never sat on bathroom floors at 4 in the morning asking if they were strong enough to survive. And she would look like she belonged there, because she did. Daniel appeared beside her in a tailored suit that fit him perfectly. He had grown into a handsome young man, tall and confident, with his father's blue eyes, but his mother's steadiness. "Ready?" he asked. "Ready." They entered the ballroom together, mother and son, advisor and CEO, two people who had built something from nothing and were about to see their work celebrated. The evening unfolded in waves of congratulations and introductions. Daniel handled the attention with practiced grace, accepting compliments, but deflecting them toward his team, his partners, his mother, never claiming sole credit, never positioning himself as a lone genius, always acknowledging the collaboration that had built Drake Technologies. Vivian watched him work the room and felt something she had not expected. Pride so intense it almost hurt. This was who she had raised. This was the character she had shaped, the values she had instilled, all those lessons about partnership and credit and showing up for the people who depend on you. He had absorbed every one. Then she felt it, a prickling sensation at the back of her neck, the awareness of being watched, the instinct that had kept her safe through years of navigating hostile professional environments. She turned, and there was Marcus. He stood near the bar, visibly older than she remembered. His once confident posture now weighted with something that looked like exhaustion or defeat. His suit was expensive, but slightly dated, the uniform of someone trying to project success they no longer possessed. Their eyes met across the ballroom, and everything that happened in the opening of this story began to unfold. My friends, I need to stop here for a moment, because what Vivian said to Marcus in that alcove, that love without loyalty is just attraction. That partnership without commitment is just convenience. That is something I want every person watching this to burn into their memory. We live in a world that celebrates the feeling of love without examining its substance. We call attraction love and wonder why it fades. We call desire commitment and are shocked when it breaks under pressure. Real love is a verb, not just a noun. Real partnership is what you do when it is hard, not just what you feel when it is easy. And the person who disappears when you need them most was never really your partner. They were just someone enjoying the ride. If this truth resonates with you, hit that like button right now. Drop a comment with the word loyalty so I know you heard it. And subscribe to this channel because we tell stories that do not just entertain, they transform. The confrontation in the alcove had ended, but the evening was not over. Vivian returned to the ballroom to find Daniel preparing to take the stage. The formal program was beginning. The honorees would be recognized, remarks would be made, and her son would speak to a room full of the most powerful people in business. She found a seat near the front, close enough to see his face clearly, close enough for him to find her in the crowd when he needed to. The host introduced Daniel with a list of accomplishments that still seemed impossible when she heard them spoken aloud. Youngest self, made billionaire in sustainable technology. Founder of a company that had transformed how buildings interacted with the environment. Philanthropist who had already donated more to educational causes than most people earned in a lifetime. Daniel took the stage to thunderous applause. "Thank you," he said, once the room quieted. "Thank you for this recognition. And thank you to the Forbes organization for highlighting the work we are doing at Drake Technologies." He paused, looking out at the assembled crowd, finding his mother's face in the sea of strangers. "But I did not come here tonight to talk about my company. I came here to talk about the woman who made everything I have accomplished possible." A murmur rippled through the audience. This was not the standard acceptance speech, not the expected platitudes about hard work and innovation and seizing opportunities. "Everything I have accomplished started in a 400-square-foot apartment with a mother who refused to let circumstances define our future." Vivian felt tears prick her eyes. She had not known what Daniel planned to say, had not asked him to acknowledge her publicly, had expected nothing but was receiving everything. "When I was born, my mother had nothing. She had been given nothing by a world that should have protected her. She had been abandoned by someone who should have stayed. She had been erased from work she helped create and denied credit she had earned." The room was absolutely silent, everyone sensing that something important was happening, something more significant than typical gala remarks. But instead of becoming bitter, she became brilliant. Instead of teaching me to hate, she taught me to build. Instead of filling me with the poison of her own pain, she filled me with the certainty that I could create something good. Daniel's voice grew stronger, more certain. This was not a performance. This was testimony. She taught me that success is not about what you accumulate. It is about what you build that serves others. She taught me that partnership means showing up especially when it is hard. She taught me that the people who throw you away do not define you. The life you build after they leave does. He looked directly at Vivian, their eyes meeting across the distance. "Mom, this award is yours as much as mine. Every sacrifice you made, every night you went without so I could have more, every dream you deferred so I could dream freely. I see all of it. I will spend the rest of my life being worthy of it." The applause that followed was different from the polite appreciation that had greeted other speakers. This was genuine emotion, recognition that something real had just been shared, something that transcended the usual networking and self-promotion of events like this. Vivian stood when Daniel returned to her side, pulling him into an embrace that 20 years of struggle had earned. "I did not know you were going to say all that," she whispered. "I have been waiting my whole life to say it," he replied. "I just needed the right room full of people to hear it." From somewhere near the back of the ballroom, Marcus Bennett watched the standing ovation his son received for honoring the woman Marcus had abandoned. Every word Daniel spoke was a testament to Vivian's character and a condemnation of Marcus's choices, not because Daniel attacked him, but because Daniel had clearly never needed him. That was the cruelest truth of all. Marcus could have been there could have watched Daniel grow, learn, struggle, triumph. Could have been the father Daniel mentioned in grateful acceptance speeches. Could have built something real, instead of chasing status and freedom. But he had chosen differently. And some choices cannot be unchosen. Some doors once closed remain closed forever. Marcus set down his glass, turned, and walked out of the ballroom. No one noticed him leave. No one called him back. He had made himself irrelevant to his own family's story, and now he had to live with that irrelevance for the rest of his life. The morning after the gala, Vivian woke in her own apartment. She had purchased it 3 years earlier with money she had earned through her own work, had designed the interior herself, had filled it with furniture that she chose, art that she loved, evidence of a life she had built without asking anyone's permission or requiring anyone's approval. Sunlight streamed through windows that looked out over a city full of buildings. Some she had helped design in the early years of her comeback. Some that housed businesses Daniel's technology had transformed. All of them testament to the power of refusing to stay defeated. Her phone held a message from Marcus, sent sometime in the early hours of the morning. I understand now. I am sorry, not for what I can get, for what I destroyed. If Daniel ever wants to know me, I will be available. If not, I will understand. Thank you for raising someone extraordinary. He is everything I failed to be. Vivian read the message once, then set her phone aside without responding. Some apologies come too late to matter. Some bridges once burned cannot be rebuilt. And some people only learn the value of what they had when it is forever beyond their reach. But Vivian had stopped waiting for Marcus's understanding a long time ago. Her worth had never depended on his recognition. Her success had never required his validation. She was complete, had been complete for years, because she had learned to be her own audience, her own champion, her own proof of what she was worth. She made coffee, sat by the window, and watched the city wake up around her. Daniel would call later to discuss the gala coverage and their upcoming project meetings. Their partnership would continue as it always had. Mother and son, advisor and entrepreneur. Two people who had built something together that no one could take away. And somewhere across the city, Marcus Bennett was waking up alone, in a penthouse that felt emptier than it used to, facing a day full of meetings about a company that was slowly failing, carrying the weight of choices that could not be unchosen. He had everything once: money, success, a brilliant wife, a son who could have grown up knowing his father, and he had thrown it all away for a woman who did not challenge him, a life that felt easier, a freedom that turned out to be the loneliest prison of all. That was the price of abandonment, not just what you left behind, but what you became when you chose to leave. My friends, as we close this story, I want to share the lessons that Vivian's journey teaches us all. First, you are not what someone does to you. You are what you build after they leave. Marcus's abandonment did not define Vivian. Her response to it did. Every choice she made in those dark years created the woman she became. Every sacrifice built the foundation for her son's success. What happens to you is never in your control. What you do with what happens, that is where your power lives. Second, document everything. Protect yourself legally. Love with your whole heart, but guard your contributions with your whole mind. Vivian lost her professional legacy because she trusted that partnership would protect her. Learn from her experience. Keep records. Get contracts reviewed. Make sure your name is on what you create. Third, raise children to build, not to hate. Vivian could have filled Daniel with bitterness toward his father. Instead, she focused their energy on creation, on purpose, on becoming something greater than the wrong that had been done to them. That choice freed Daniel from carrying Vivian's trauma. It let him develop his own understanding, and ultimately, it made their family stronger than any shared hatred ever could have. Fourth, the people who abandon you when you are struggling do not deserve access when you are thriving. Marcus showed up when he had nothing left. He reached out when his company was failing, and his life was crumbling. That is not a change of heart. That is desperation masquerading as growth. Real change happens in the shadows when no one is watching, when there is nothing to gain. Fifth, and most importantly, waiting for someone who hurt you to finally recognize your worth is a form of self-imprisonment. Vivian did not need Marcus to apologize. She did not need the world to acknowledge her contributions. She knew what she had built, what she had survived, what she was worth. That internal certainty was more powerful than any external validation could ever be. If this story moved you, if you saw yourself in Vivian's struggle or Daniel's triumph, I need you to do something right now. Hit that subscribe button. Ring the notification bell, because this channel exists to tell stories that do not just entertain. They transform. Every video we create is designed to help you see your own life differently, to remind you that your current chapter is not your final chapter, to show you that the people who throw you away often end up watching you shine. Drop a comment and tell me, what lesson from Vivian's story resonates most deeply with you? Was it her refusal to let circumstances define her, her choice to raise Daniel without bitterness, her strength in facing Marcus without needing his validation? I read every single comment, and I want to know what spoke to you. Share this video with someone who needs to hear this message today. Someone who is in their struggle season. Someone who has been abandoned or undervalued or thrown away. Let them know that their story is not over, that their best chapters are still ahead. And remember this, you are not what they say you are. You are what you build, how you love, and who you become when no one is watching. Your second act can be more powerful than your first. Your restoration can reach further than your original creation. And your legacy is not determined by who abandoned you. It is determined by what you build after they left. This is Mr. Shawn with Millionaire Love Stories. Until next time, keep building, keep growing, keep becoming the person who makes their abandonment irrelevant. I will see you in the next story.